Back to World Crisis Radio. So, dear critics of the euro, your job is to fight the banks. Remember, if you're not fighting bankers, you are spinning your wheels. And if Goldman Sachs is attacking you and saying, let's smash the euro, and you say, yeah, let's do what Goldman Sachs wants, then you go into the dustbin of history. You will be victims of a terrible situation. So rather than let the speculators destroy the euro, why not fight speculation now? Because you might say, well, no, we'll fight speculation when we get the D-mark and the drachma back. By that time, you will be in chaos. You will be under dictatorship. You will not be able to organize anything. You will be gone. You will be muzzled. You will be silenced. So your chance now is you still have relatively acceptable economic conditions in the sense that you can still organize, right? It hasn't gotten to absolute chaos in society, grave though the situation is, and therefore you ought to take advantage of that. So the 5 points are, first of all, shut down the zombie banks, right? Don't try to pay off the Irish derivatives. Shut them down. Wipe them out. Ban speculation. Fight it with a equivalent of a Tobin tax, the Wall Street sales tax for Europe. Ban the activities of hedge funds in most cases. Ban the collateralized debt obligations, credit default swaps. So you basically wiped out derivatives between direct bans and taxation. Re-regulate commodities markets to prevent those abuses. Make sure that that reaches especially into the London and New York markets. So that's number one. Secondly, you've got to seize control of the European Central Bank. You've got to take that power away from this unelected committee of finance oligarchs, and you got to put that into the hands of a European policy-making body. And if that's the European Parliament, then that will make the European Parliament more interesting. Otherwise, what are you going to do? Give it back to the free market? The free market means the wonderful gentlemen from Deutsche Bank who have gotten you into this situation. So what's the alternative? If you believe in democratic republic representative government, it's got to go somewhere, and ultimately some kind of European Parliament has to be the way in which you would do this. You by the way, you didn't get to the euro by chance. In other words, the idea that in a world of continental megastates of the size of Russia or the United States or Canada or Brazil or China, you can't seriously expect to continue with some place like Luxembourg and use that as a currency in international trading. So this is the situation. Fight the speculators, seize the European Central Bank, then get your infrastructure and your 0% European credit for production going. Your fourth point is that using the revenues from that Tobin tax, you will save your European safety net, all of your unemployment benefits, your family allowances, old age pensions, medical expenditures. Those will be funded, and the financiers, the hedge fund hyenas, will pay. The fifth point, obviously, then, is you've got to get some kind of a system where you have the dollar, the euro, the yen, the renminbi of China, the ruble, emerging regional currencies, and so forth. These have got to come back to fixed parities along the Bretton Woods line. And at the end of the process, once you've stabilized that, you really ought to go towards gold settlement among the nations. The gold settlement would be not among individuals, but among the participating nations in the system. So gold emphatically does have a role, but not to limit the credit issuance of this entire system. So that is, those are the basics of this kind of an approach. And in the process, of course, you got to arrest those guys from Standard & Poor's, from Fitch, and from Moody's, because that's an international criminal enterprise. You got to put out Interpol warrants for those people. Otherwise, if you think that the restoration of the D-mark is the key to economic recovery, you have fallen prey to the fetishism of money. You have fallen prey to alienation, because what you're doing is you're taking the productive power of, let's say, the German economy and projecting that into a piece of paper or metal coins. It's not where it's located. It's located in the mental capital the scientific and technological development of the German workforce. That's your resource, and similarly for the other countries. Now, let's apply this to the situation in Spain. We saw these Spain demonstrations, and a couple of things to be said about this, right? As usual, we have youth with no leadership. There is no leadership. It is a leaderless group. They have no leaders, no program, and no organization, except then, in reality, they do have some kind of a leader, because there's somebody who's got the ability to impose the method of assemblies where nothing can be done unless there is a consensus. Now, I guess this comes from certain bankrupt theories of so-called nonviolent action. Let me just remind you that the nonviolent stuff is exactly the Gene Sharp, Robert Helvey, and Albert Einstein Institute stuff. In other words, the nonviolent is part of the thing feeding into the color revolutions, right? Gene Sharp was the assistant to Reverend A.J. Muste, the Trotskyist labor organizer, or whatever he was, Christian Trotskyist, or some combination of that. The consensus method is bankrupt. It's a straitjacket. You can't come to any decisions. The point of the consensus is it really says that the process is everything and the policy goals are nothing. No. If you've got 40% youth unemployment in Spain, getting those jobs created has got to be the goal. My proposal for the European program, call it 40 million jobs. 40 million new productive jobs in Europe at union pay scales, not low wages, not the usual rip-off, but high technology, high capital intensity. You want to have the capital investment per job be as high as you can get it. Now, otherwise, speaking to the Spanish demonstrators, the problem you have is that if you don't have a program, and if you think you don't have leaders, you will be manipulated by operatives who will move among you, and therefore you've got to have a program. And the obvious first thing that I should have put this at the head of all these other demands, is you're going to need immediate debt moratorium. What's the answer for Greece? Greece needs a debt moratorium, an immediate freeze on all payments of international financial debt. Same thing for Spain. Same thing for Ireland, Portugal, Italy, Belgium, and everybody else. Because the largest proportion of these illegitimate fictitious debts is pure derivatives. Derivative speculation is incompatible with the future existence of humanity. So you Spanish kids, your program ought to be, first of all, moratorium, debt freeze. We cannot pay this stuff. Take the debt service and use that to invest in new productive jobs, because you've got that 40% youth unemployment rate. So if you don't come up with a program, then somebody else will use you, right? Look at this Egypt stuff. And you can see there's some kind of a group called the 30th of May or something like this. It's probably yet another clone of Utpour. The other thing, of course, you've got to declare your independence from the Second International. We've seen it. We mentioned it earlier in the broadcast. Papandreou of Greece, Zapatero of Spain, Socrates of Portugal, the lady there in Iceland, they have been the main enforcement agents. Those are the debt collectors for the banks and for the International Monetary Fund. You have got to break from them. Obviously, you don't want to fall into the hands of these xenophobic types, right? The Wilders in Holland, or the Freedom Party of Austria. These people are equally bankrupt. They have no answers on economics. They're basically pushing ethno-cultural issues, essentially race hatred or ethnic hatred, as a means of paralyzing a mass upsurge that is now available. So, leadership, program above all, and an organization, if you can get it, build it around those. Because if you don't, you will be simply used as the kids in Egypt were used. But go to my website, take a look at the program for the U.S. I hope to have that program elaborated for Europe. It's the same basic principle, 5 points, starting again with a debt moratorium for Greece and for everybody else. We'll see you again next week here on World Crisis Radio.